Open your freezer right now. If you've got freezer burned meat from months ago or half-used ingredients you completely forgot about, you're wasting food and losing real money you don't need to be. Meanwhile, the freezer in a Japanese home is carefully packed, precisely organized, and actively working to stretch every dollar while cutting kitchen waste down to almost nothing. The average Japanese household throws away dramatically less food than the average American one, and it comes down to 26 freezer and storage habits built around a principle called mottainai, the refusal to ever let anything useful go to waste. I'm going to walk you through each individual hack so you can turn your own freezer into the backbone of a frugal, waste-free kitchen that makes your groceries last up to 10 times longer. The very first hack takes one of the cheapest proteins in the grocery store and completely transforms its texture into something meaty and satisfying that tastes like it came from a restaurant kitchen. Hack number 8 can easily help you save well over $100, especially with today's dairy prices. And the very last hack is the single habit that explains why Japanese families almost never spend money on takeout on a tired weeknight. Hack number 1 is all about tofu, and it comes from a tradition so old in Japan that it goes back to the days when farmers would leave blocks of tofu outside in the winter cold to preserve them through the season. If you have ever bought a block of tofu and found it too soft, too bland, or just kind of forgettable, this method changes everything about how tofu behaves in your kitchen. Take an unopened package of firm or extra firm tofu and place it directly into the freezer for at least one full day, or until it is completely solid all the way through to the center. When the water inside the tofu freezes, it expands and creates thousands of tiny air pockets throughout the entire block. The next day, move the frozen tofu into the refrigerator and let it thaw slowly overnight until it has softened completely. Once it is fully thawed, you will notice the color has changed to a soft yellow and the block feels heavier and slightly spongy in your hands. Gently press the tofu between 2 plates or squeeze it with your hands over the sink to release all the extra water that is built up inside. What you are left with is a completely transformed ingredient that is chewy, meaty, and thirsty for flavor in a way fresh tofu simply cannot compete with. It soaks up marinades, sauces, and seasonings far better than fresh tofu ever could, and it crisps beautifully in a hot pan with just a little oil. This is one of the reasons restaurant tofu always tastes so much better than the block you brought home from the store. And the very next hack works on an ingredient you probably throw away far more often than you realize. Hack number 2 is going to save you a serious amount of money over the course of the year, because bread is honestly one of the most wasted foods in almost every household in America. In Japan, families almost universally freeze their shokapan, which is the tall square white loaf that most Japanese households buy, and they portion it into the freezer the same day it comes home from the bakery before a single slice has had the chance to go stale. On the counter, a loaf of bread goes moldy in just 4 or 5 days, but in the freezer, it can keep for months without any loss in taste or texture at all. The one thing you have to do though is slice the loaf before it goes in, because a whole frozen loaf is basically useless when you actually want to make toast. Take your fresh loaf, cut it into even slices using a serrated bread knife, and then place them all into a zip-top freezer bag, pressing out as much air as you can before sealing it up. Whenever you want toast in the morning, you simply pull out 2 slices at a time and drop them straight into the toaster without thawing them first. There is no waiting around, no waste, and honestly, nobody at your breakfast table will notice a single difference in the taste. This one small habit means you can buy bread on sale, freeze every loaf you bring home, and stop throwing away half a bag every single week. And on the subject of foods that get thrown away far too often, the next hack tackles those brown, spotty bananas sitting on your counter right now. Hack number 3 turns those overripe bananas into pure baking gold, because a spotty brown banana is not garbage at all. Japanese families would never let a brown banana go to waste, because the spotted ones are actually the most valuable bananas in the whole bunch. Peel the bananas first, break them into rough chunks with your hands, and then place them into a zip-top freezer bag, pressing the air out before sealing and freezing them flat on a shelf. They will keep this way for several months, and frozen bananas actually mash up softer and sweeter than fresh ones, which makes them absolutely ideal for banana bread, muffins, or fluffy pancakes on a weekend morning with the family. If you drop a handful straight into a blender with a splash of milk, they turn into a thick, creamy smoothie without needing any ice cream or added sugar to sweeten it up. Whenever you see spotty bananas on the markdown rack at your grocery store, you should honestly buy them on purpose because they cost almost nothing and freeze perfectly for weeks of baking ahead. That kind of thinking, where nothing goes to waste and every cheap ingredient does the work of three, sits at the very heart of how Japanese home cooks approach their entire kitchen. This is exactly the kind of approach I have pulled together into my book called The Complete Japanese Kitchen Handbook, which walks you through hundreds of these small habits one by one. It shows you exactly how to cut hundreds of dollars off your grocery bill every month, keep your pantry from ever going to waste, and turn the cheapest ingredients on the shelf into meals your family will genuinely love. You can grab the book over at frugaljapan.shop by scanning the QR code on the screen or clicking the link down in the description below for instant access. Let's jump back into the list now with a hack that most people have absolutely no idea is even possible. Hack number 4 is freezing milk, and while dairy is a fairly modern addition to the Japanese kitchen, the same careful buying habits Japanese families use for every other ingredient apply perfectly here. This one hack alone can save you a real chunk of money over the course of a year, because if milk goes on sale at your grocery store, or you are heading out of town for a few days with half a carton left in the refrigerator, freezing it is a fantastic option that most people never even consider. One important step to remember though is to pour out about a cup of milk before it goes into the freezer, because milk expands as it freezes and can easily split the container if there is no room for it to grow inside. When you are ready to use it again, thaw the milk slowly in the refrigerator over a day or two, and then give the container a really good shake because the fat naturally separates a little during freezing. Once shaken well, it is perfect for cooking, baking, and even drinking straight, and it will keep for a full 3 months in the freezer instead of just a few days in the fridge. And the next hack is another Japanese kitchen secret that will honestly change the way you cook with one of the most flavorful ingredients on the planet. Hack number 5 sounds completely wrong until you actually try it, because freezing mushrooms actually makes them taste better than fresh ones do. Japanese cooks have known for a very long time that mushrooms naturally have tough cell walls that lock in their deep, savory umami compounds, and when you freeze them, those cell walls physically break apart, releasing far more of that flavor into whatever you are cooking. Take fresh mushrooms like shiitake, creminai, button, or portobello, wipe them clean with a dry paper towel, trim off the tough ends, and then place them into a zip-top freezer bag in a single flat layer. Press out all the air, seal the bag, and place it flat in the freezer for at least 1 full day. When you are ready to cook with them, do not thaw them first, because you want to drop them straight from the freezer into a hot pan, a simmering soup, a pasta sauce, or a stir fry. You will taste a richer, deeper, more satisfying mushroom flavor almost immediately, and one bag will stay perfectly good for about a month in the freezer. And once you get the mushroom trick down, the next hack tackles another ingredient that most people totally give up on when it comes to freezing. Hack number 6 is about cheese, which freezes beautifully as long as you know the right way and the wrong way to do it. A whole block of cheese turns dry and crumbly after freezing, which most people find pretty disappointing when they open the bag to make a sandwich. Japanese housewives apply the same buying logic to cheese that they use for every other ingredient in the kitchen, which is to always buy the whole block on sale and portion it yourself instead of paying nearly double for the pre-shredded bag. The trick is to grate the cheese first while it is still fresh and firm, and then place the loose shreds into a zip-top freezer bag while pressing out all the air inside. Flatten the bag so it lies nice and thin, and then place it into the freezer where it will keep for several months without any loss in flavor or usefulness. Now you have fresh grated cheese ready to sprinkle straight onto a hot pizza, a bowl of pasta, or a bubbling gratin, and you never have to thaw it before using it in any dish. This trick works beautifully with cheddar, mozzarella, Monterey Jack, or really any hard or semi-hard cheese that you might use during a normal week of cooking. And the next hack takes another sale item and turns it into a full year of savings if you play your cards right. Hack number 7 is preserving eggs when they go on sale. Eggs are used constantly in Japanese cooking, from tamagoyaki rolled omelets at breakfast to chuanmushi savory custards at dinner. So when eggs go on sale, an experienced Japanese home cook does not just fill the basket for the week, they fill the freezer for the next several months using this exact method. Crack the eggs into a muffin tin, placing 1 egg per cup, and then gently stir each one with a fork to break the yolk and mix it slightly with the white. Place the muffin tin flat into the freezer until each egg is completely solid all the way through, which usually takes a few hours depending on your freezer. Once frozen solid, pop the eggs out of the tin by twisting the pan slightly, and then transfer them into a labeled freezer bag where they will keep for close to a full year. Now you always have single portion eggs ready to grab for baking a cake, making French toast on a Sunday morning, or scrambling a quick breakfast when you are running late for work. Whole eggs left in their shell will crack and make a real mess in the freezer, but out of the shell, they preserve wonderfully with no loss of flavor or texture. And the next hack takes another baking essential and stretches your grocery money in a serious way. Hack number 8 is butter, and it freezes beautifully right in its original wrapper for 6 months to a full year without losing any flavor or texture. Japanese home cooks approach butter the same way they approach every staple ingredient, buying it in bulk when the price drops and keeping several pounds in the freezer at all times so they never have to pay the full shelf price in a rushed moment. Whenever you spot butter on sale, especially around the holiday baking season when prices tend to drop significantly, this is the exact moment to stock up in a serious way. Simply place the sealed packages directly into the freezer without any additional wrapping or containers needed at all. When you need butter for a recipe, move 1 pack down to the refrigerator the night before, and by morning it will be perfectly soft and ready to use in your baking or cooking. This one habit alone can save you a good chunk of money over the course of a year, because you never have to pay full price for butter ever again in your life. And the next hack applies the same freezer logic to something you probably keep in a jar or a bag in your pantry right now. Hack number 9 is about nuts, and honestly, most people have no idea they should even be storing them in the freezer. Because nuts are naturally rich in oils, they slowly go rancid in the pantry over time, even when they are kept in a sealed jar or a plastic container. In the freezer though, they stay perfectly fresh and flavorful for a full year or even longer without any loss in taste or texture. Transfer your almonds, walnuts, pecans, cashews, or any other nuts you regularly cook with into a zip-top freezer bag or an airtight container, press out all the air, and freeze them flat. Whenever a recipe calls for a handful of nuts, you simply scoop out exactly what you need and put the rest right back into the freezer, where they will continue to stay fresh for the next time you need them. And the next hack solves one of the most frustrating problems that every home cook has faced at least once in their kitchen. Hack number 10 will completely change the way you buy fresh herbs at the grocery store from this day forward. If you have ever bought a bunch of parsley or basil for one single recipe and then watched the rest turn to slime in the refrigerator a few days later, this technique is going to feel like real magic. Chop the entire bunch of parsley, basil, cilantro, or rosemary while it is still fresh and bright green, and then pack the pieces into an ice cube tray, filling each compartment about 3/4 of the way full. Top each cube with a small spoonful of olive oil to seal in the flavor and protect the herbs from freezer burn, and then place the tray into the freezer until everything is completely solid. Once frozen, pop the cubes out of the tray by twisting it slightly and transfer them into a labeled freezer bag where they will keep for many months. Whenever you are cooking a hot dish, simply drop 1 cube straight into a hot pan and it melts almost instantly into fresh, fragrant herb flavor that tastes like you just picked them from a garden outside. And the next hack takes another fresh ingredient that always seems to go bad before you can finish it. Hack number 11 is the Japanese technique for shoga, which is their word for ginger, and it deals with the frustrating fact that fresh ginger dries out and gets stringy long before you can use even half of the knob you bought at the store. The absolute simplest solution is to place the whole piece of ginger, skin, and all directly into the freezer where it will keep for many months in perfect condition. When you need it for a recipe, take it out and grate it while it is still frozen, solid, and you will find that frozen ginger actually grates much finer than fresh ginger does, releasing far more flavor and juice into whatever you are cooking. The frozen ginger actually grates more easily than fresh does, because the ice crystals broke down the tough, fibrous cell walls inside the root, which is why Japanese cooks have been storing ginger this way for generations. You do not even need to peel it first, because the skin grates right in with the rest and disappears completely into the dish. 1 knob of ginger stored this way can honestly last you 3 or 4 months instead of just a single week. And the next hack does exactly the same thing for another ingredient that shows up in nearly every recipe you cook. Hack number 12 is freezing garlic, and it works just as beautifully as freezing ginger while saving you from ever having to buy that flavorless jarred minced garlic again. Japanese cooks treat garlic with the same respect they show ginger, keeping it in the freezer instead of the pantry where it slowly loses its punch. Peel the individual cloves from a fresh head of garlic, place them into a small zip-top bag, press out all the air, and then freeze them flat on a shelf in your freezer. They stay soft enough to slice, mince, or grate straight from frozen without any thawing needed for cooking. Whenever a recipe calls for garlic, you simply pull out 1 or 2 cloves and add them straight to your hot pan, and you get that fresh, punchy garlic flavor that jarred garlic never delivers, no matter how much of it you use. And the next hack solves one of the most wasteful ingredient problems that every single home cook has run into at some point. Hack number 13 tackles tomato paste, which is one of those ingredients where almost every recipe calls for just 1 tablespoon, but the can always holds about 6 tablespoons of the stuff. The rest usually ends up fuzzy and forgotten at the back of your refrigerator a few weeks later, sitting there until you finally throw it out in disgust. Tomato paste is not a traditional Japanese ingredient at all, but the mottainai mindset applies to any pantry once you adopt it, and Japanese home cooks who prepare Western-style dishes use exactly this trick to make sure the entire can gets used. To solve this problem once and for all, spoon the leftover tomato paste in tablespoon-sized dollops onto a plate lined with wax paper or parchment paper. Place the plate flat in the freezer until the dollops are completely solid all the way through, and then transfer them into a labeled freezer bag where they will keep for many months. 1 small can of tomato paste now stretches across 6 different recipes instead of being wasted after just 1, and you always have exactly the right amount ready to drop straight into a hot pan. And the same clever trick works beautifully for a whole range of liquid leftovers that most people pour right down the drain. Hack number 14 takes that same principle and applies it to buttermilk, broth, coconut milk, and any other liquid leftover that always seems to end up wasted. If you have half a cup of buttermilk left over from making pancakes, some broth left in a carton after cooking a soup, or even a splash of coconut milk at the bottom of a can, you should freeze all of it in ice cube trays right away. Once the cubes are completely solid, transfer them into labeled bags in the freezer where they will keep in perfect condition for many months to come. Whenever a recipe calls for a splash of any of these ingredients, you simply drop in exactly the number of cubes you need for the dish, and absolutely nothing ever goes to waste in your kitchen anymore. And the next hack takes this exact same idea and applies it to something even more surprising that most people pour down the sink without a second thought. Hack number 15 is freezing leftover wine, which turns what used to be waste into an incredible secret weapon for cooking that costs you absolutely nothing at all. If you have a splash of red or white wine left at the bottom of a bottle after dinner, pour it into an ice cube tray and freeze it completely solid overnight. Once frozen through, transfer the cubes into a small labeled freezer bag where they will keep in perfect condition for 6 months or even longer than that. Whenever you are deglazing a hot pan, simmering a pasta sauce, or building a slow braise on the stove, drop in 1 or 2 cubes to add real depth and complexity to your cooking. This one small habit turns what used to be pure waste into a professional level flavor booster that home cooks all over Japan use to elevate their everyday meals. And the next hack changes the way you use one of the most popular frozen foods in the entire world. Hack number 16 is a game changer for anyone who buys fresh berries at the grocery store on a regular basis. If you throw fresh strawberries, blueberries, or raspberries straight into a freezer bag and freeze them, they clump together into one solid, unusable brick that you have to hack apart with a knife just to get a small handful. The Japanese approach is to spread the berries out in a single layer on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper, and then place the whole sheet flat into the freezer for about 2 hours until each berry is individually frozen through. Even in Japan, where fresh fruit is treated with almost ceremonial care and given as formal gifts, home cooks always reach for frozen berries whenever the fruit is going to be cooked or blended into something. Once frozen separately, pour them all into a zip-top freezer bag where they will now stay completely separate from each other. You can shake out exactly the amount you need for a smoothie, a bowl of yogurt, or a batch of muffins, and the rest of the berries stay perfect in the freezer for the next time you need them. And the next hack solves one of the biggest mysteries that most home cooks have about freezing vegetables. Hack number 17 explains why your frozen green beans, broccoli, or peas always seem to come out of the freezer looking gray and mushy, no matter how carefully you pack them. Vegetables have natural enzymes inside them that keep working, even in the cold of the freezer, slowly breaking down their color, texture, and flavor over time without you knowing. To stop this process completely, you need to blanch the vegetables first by dropping them into a pot of boiling water for 1 to 3 minutes depending on the vegetable, and then immediately transferring them to a bowl of ice water to stop the cooking. This quick heat shock deactivates the enzymes completely and permanently. And once you drain the vegetables and freeze them flat in a bag, they come out months later looking almost as good as the day you first bought them. And the next hack is honestly the single most powerful trick on this entire list for saving both time and money. Hack number 18 is the cook once, eat twice principle that Japanese home cooks have been using for generations to make their kitchens more efficient. Whenever you are making a big pot of curry, chili, spaghetti sauce, stew, or a casserole for dinner tonight, it is almost no extra work at all to just double the entire recipe. You eat one portion tonight for dinner with the family, and then you portion out the rest into flat freezer bags for another night down the road when you need it. 2 months from now, on a night when you are exhausted from work and takeout is calling your name loudly, you can pull a homemade dinner straight from the freezer instead of spending $30 on a delivery order. Just one doubled meal a week, and by the end of 2 months, you will have a freezer completely stocked with ready-made dinners for the busiest weeknights of your life. And the next hack does the same thing for one of the most affordable ingredients that everyone tends to overlook in a modern kitchen. Hack number 19 takes advantage of the fact that dried beans cost a small fraction of what canned beans cost at the grocery store. Nobody actually wants to soak and simmer beans on a busy Tuesday evening after work though, and this is exactly where the freezer comes in to save the day. The solution is to cook a huge pot of beans on the weekend when you have some free time to spare, and then freeze them flat in freezer bags in 2 cup portions, which is about the same amount as 1 can of beans from the store. When a recipe calls for beans, you just grab a bag and drop it straight into your dish. No soaking, no simmering, no waiting. You end up with the incredible savings of dried beans and the total convenience of canned ones at the same time, which is a real win for your grocery budget over the course of every single month. And the next hack transforms your entire freezer into an organized system that runs like a well-oiled machine. Hack number 20 is about how you actually store the bags themselves, and it will make your freezer feel 3 times bigger overnight. Whatever you are freezing in a bag, whether it is soup, sauce, cooked beans, or brown ground meat, you should always lay the bag flat on a baking sheet until it is completely solid. Once frozen through, the bag becomes a thin, stackable slab that takes up almost no space at all in your freezer compared to a lumpy shape. These slabs stack neatly on top of each other, and even better, they stand upright like books in a bookshelf so you can flip through your freezer like a recipe box on a rainy afternoon. A thick frozen brick can take all day to thaw on the counter, but a thin slab thaws completely in under an hour in a bowl of cold water. And the next hack ensures you actually remember what is inside every single one of those slabs. Hack number 21 might sound too simple to matter, but it is honestly the single biggest source of freezer waste in most kitchens across the country. Every single thing that goes into your freezer needs to be labeled clearly, because an unlabeled bag in January becomes a total mystery to you, and mysteries almost always end up going straight in the trash without a second thought. All you need is a piece of masking tape and a permanent marker to write down what is inside the bag and the date you froze it on. 10 seconds of your time saves you from throwing away perfectly good food later. Place the newest items at the back of the freezer and rotate the older ones to the front, so you always end up using the oldest food first before it can lose any of its quality. Most freezer waste is not from spoilage at all, but simply from people forgetting what they have. And the next hack takes something you were about to throw in the trash and turns it into a rich, delicious ingredient. Hack number 22 is honestly one of the most Japanese hacks on this entire list, because Japanese cooks have a deep respect for using every last part of every ingredient. Keep one dedicated bag or container in the freezer just for kitchen scraps, and this simple habit will change the way you cook forever. Every single time you cook a meal, toss in the onion ends, carrot peels, celery tops, tough leek greens, chicken bones from the dinner plates, and even the hard rind from a piece of Parmesan cheese. When the bag is completely full and ready, empty everything into a large pot. Cover it with plenty of water and simmer for 1 to 2 hours before straining out all the solids at the end. What you are left with is a rich, homemade broth made entirely from things you are about to throw in the trash, and it honestly tastes far deeper than anything you can buy in a carton at the store. Japanese cooks call this yasai dashi, which literally means vegetable stock, and it is one of the foundations of Shojin Ryori, the traditional Buddhist temple cuisine that treats every ingredient as worthy of respect. And the next hack solves a pantry problem that almost no one in America knows about, but is very common in Japanese homes. Hack number 23 deals with those tiny pantry moths that sometimes show up in bags of flour and rice, and it is genuinely one of the most useful things you can do with your freezer. The moths almost always come home from the store already inside the package, as eggs that are far too small for you to see with your naked eye. Placing every new bag of flour, cornmeal, rice, and oats into the freezer for 3 or 4 days before it goes into your pantry kills those eggs completely before they can ever hatch inside. Once the freezing period is done, you can move the bags into your pantry as normal, and you will never have to deal with a pantry infestation that forces you to throw out an entire cupboard full of food. And the next hack is one that will actually save you money on your electricity bill every single month. Hack number 24 is something almost no one ever thinks about, but an empty freezer is actually an expensive freezer to run over time. Every time you open the freezer door to grab something, all the cold air spills out onto the floor, and the machine has to work harder and use more electricity to chill all that empty space back down to freezing temperature. Frozen food naturally holds the cold for you, which means a full freezer is far more efficient than a half-empty one. If yours has empty space right now, fill clean milk jugs or plastic bottles with water and freeze them to take up all the extra room. Your electricity bill drops noticeably over time, and as a real bonus, if the power ever goes out during a bad storm, a full freezer will stay frozen for about twice as long as a half-empty one. And the next hack takes one of the most useful cooking ingredients and makes it available in exactly the right portion size every single time. Hack number 25 is freezing homemade broth in ice cube trays. And this is one of those things that is so simple you will wonder why you are not doing it your whole life. Homemade broth is fantastic to make from scratch, but a big pot always produces way more than you can use in a single week of cooking meals at home. Japanese kitchens revolve around dashi, which is the light savory broth at the heart of nearly every soup, sauce, and simmered dish, and freezing it in small portions is the standard way Japanese home cooks make sure a fresh pot always lasts through weeks of cooking. The solution is to freeze your extra broth in ice cube trays, which lets you use exactly the amount you need for any recipe without ever thawing a huge frozen block. Once the cubes are completely solid overnight, pop them out and store them in a labeled freezer bag where they will keep for 6 months or even longer than that. Whenever you need just a splash of broth for a risotto, a pan sauce, or a quick simmering soup, you drop in 2 or 3 cubes straight from the freezer and let them melt right into your dish. And the very last hack on this list is honestly my absolute favorite tomato trick of all time. Hack number 26 turns one of the most annoying kitchen jobs into something completely effortless, and it works with any variety of fresh tomato you can find. Take your fresh tomatoes, wipe them clean with a dry paper towel, and place them whole and unpeeled onto a baking sheet before putting them into the freezer for a few hours until they are completely solid. Once frozen through, transfer them into a large freezer bag where they will keep for many months, ready and waiting for any soup, stew, or homemade sauce that you might want to make in the future. The real magic happens when you take a frozen tomato out and run it under warm water for just a few seconds, because the skin slips right off in your hands with absolutely no effort, no boiling water, and no blanching required at all. You get perfectly peeled tomatoes in seconds, which is a genuine game changer for anyone who cooks with fresh tomatoes on a regular basis in their kitchen. I am really curious to know from you, which of these hacks do you think you will actually try first in your own kitchen at home? Let me know down in the comments below so we can share ideas with each other. There is a truly beautiful word used in Japan called mottainai, and it expresses that quiet sense of regret you feel when something useful gets wasted for absolutely no good reason. These 26 hacks are not really about your freezer at all, but about respecting every single ingredient you bring home from the grocery store every week. Now that your freezer is properly stocked with all of these amazing ingredients, you can make quick and delicious meals with ease. Grab a small handful of your frozen mushrooms and drop them straight from the freezer into a hot pan with a splash of oil, letting them sear and release their deep, savory flavor for a few minutes on medium heat. Add a cube or two of your frozen garlic and ginger to the pan, and then break off a portion of your frozen tofu that you thawed and pressed earlier in the week. Cut the tofu into bite-sized cubes, toss them into the pan, and let them soak up all the flavors while turning golden and crisp around the edges of each piece. Add a splash of soy sauce, a broth cube from your freezer, and 1 cube of frozen wine for real depth. And in less than 10 minutes total, you have a restaurant-quality tofu and mushroom stir-fry made almost entirely from ingredients you prepared ahead of time. For a second meal that comes together just as fast, drop a few frozen tomatoes into a warm pot and let their skin slip right off under a little warm water before roughly chopping them into the pan. Add a cube or two of frozen wine, a spoonful of frozen tomato paste dollops, a cube of frozen basil and olive oil, and 1 cube of frozen garlic to build up the flavor base. Let everything simmer together for just a few minutes until it transforms into a rich, fragrant pasta sauce that honestly tastes like it took you all afternoon to make from scratch. Toss in your cooked pasta, sprinkle with grated frozen cheese straight from the bag, and dinner is completely ready in about 15 minutes with almost no effort at all. This is what respecting your ingredients truly looks like in daily practice at home, with nothing wasted and everything ready when you need it most on a busy weeknight. I really hope these 26 Japanese freezer and storage hacks help you save time in the kitchen, cut down your grocery bill every single month, and always have something wonderful ready to cook on, even the busiest weeknights of your life. If today's ideas gave you at least one new trick that you cannot wait to try in your own kitchen, please do me a small favor by hitting that like button below, subscribing to the channel for more practical kitchen tips every week, and sharing this video with a friend or family member who could really use a more organized freezer at home. Click the video appearing on your screen for another video I think you'll like, and I'll see you in the next one.